First of all, I want to thank David for organizing this conference. It's a kind of unique, just focused on quality, right? Code quality and performance, which is a big thing actually. If you are writing software, and if you don't keep in mind the quality and performance, it's a problem. It's a problem in long run. So in this session, however, it's a little different. I want to talk about security, right? Security. And I term I call it the secure first software. You probably heard other cloud first and so on and so forth, but this is secure first means what it is. I will in this session I'll talk about what secure first is. And when you are either a software developer, you're a front end developer, back end developer, you're an architect, lead, or even a full stack developer, or a database DBA or database developer, doesn't matter whoever you are. The goal here is like how to build the secure first software. So Simon is going to drive me. If somebody who doesn't know, my name is Mahesh Chan. I'm founder of C Sharp Corner. I run a company, Mindcracker Inc. here. And I have been running this company, Mindcracker Inc. is a software consulting for past 20 years or so. All these experience I'm going to share is based on what we learned from when we build new software for our clients and some are for ourselves. So when you think of a software security, right? When you are, let's say you are a software developer and you're building a software, a client comes to you or your manager comes to you, hey, we have this new application we need to build. So most often you don't think about security. You look at the UI, you look at the requirements, you look at, okay, what kind of backend database we need. However, you don't really spend too much time on security on day one when you're designing and architecting software. And that's really I want to talk about today is that software security is not just a job of IT people, okay? That's one thing sometimes people really kind of think of is that, oh, it's a security, it's probably the security team will handle that. That's their job. But that's not how we have to think. No matter if you are a front end, you're back end, or even writing APIs, you're working on databases, or you're managing your servers and networks. Everywhere you have to think of security. And you would say, why do I need to worry about security these days? Because there are more than 1 million hacks every day. Not hacks, at least attacks, cyber attacks. There are more than 1 million cyber attacks every day coming from different parts of the world. So I don't know if you hear these news, but they're always, okay, today's Twitter account got hacked, Twitter database got hacked, Facebook got hacked, Target got hacked, all these financial services are getting hacked. Why are they getting hacked? Because there are not enough security, measures in these softwares when they were built. And not just from the backend side, not just from the hardware side, but also from the software side. This session is for everybody. It's not just for software developer. It's basically from you. You're a front end developer, you're a back end developer, you're an architect, you're a lead, or even you are a data. Everybody. At least there are some tips in here. And again, this because we're gonna shorten this for 30 minutes. So I'm just gonna go run through these tips. If you want to know more details on these tips, there are certain articles on C Sharp Corner. Or there are some references as well in this document. If you need this slide, I will share this slide. Simon, reach out to Simon. He can share the slide with you. So let's think about the security first design principle. And one more thing I forgot is please let us know what you're thinking about this conference. Are you enjoying it? What is your feedback? Because we may end up doing this every year. David would probably love to do this once in a year. Any feedback you have for us, for David, for Simon, what else you would like to see in this conference? Did you learn anything from it? Post your comments, share your comments, win some prizes. But definitely, give us feedback, because without the feedback, it's hard for us as speakers or even organizers know that are we doing these conferences? Is it even worth doing it, right? So more feedback we have, better it is. So, all right, so let's get back to this session, security first design principle. So what does that mean really? That means when you are architecting a new software application, it doesn't matter. It's a web application, is it a mobile application, it is even a client application, or it's an enterprise-wide system, or even it doesn't matter what kind of software you're building. When you are design and architecture phase, you're sitting down and designing with architects or your leads and working with it. That time you also have to think about the security. You cannot just say, oh, we'll think about security later. That's not how you should be thinking in today's world. Um, in design first principle, everyone in the team has to include in these security discussions. It's just not software developers, it's just not DevOps, it's just not IT people. Everyone in the team, front-end developers, back-end developers, architects, DevOps, and engineers and testers and IT, whoever is managing the servers, they all have to sit down and work on this together. This is not just one person's job. So that's what really security first design principle means. Um, Also, it's very important if you read latest blogs from, say, Microsoft or these companies, you will always see there's more updates coming. Every time you see a new framework updated, every time, say, Microsoft updates .NET framework, there may be some changes related to security, related to authentication, related to authorization. You have to keep up to date with your data. It's just not like, oh, I know already how to do this in previous version, because security is changing very frequently, because patches are coming up, a lot of things change there. So make sure you keep up to date with those. So let's look at some of these tips. So, and again, in my title it says top 10 tips, but it's more than actually top 10, because what I did is I end up separating these for the front end, back end, and server, and so on and so forth. So these are some of the tips I will run through. And obviously, I can't go through all in details, because each of these tips really a one session on itself. So if you want to learn more, there's separate articles on C Sharp Corner and everywhere on the web. If you search, for example, how to implement HTTPS in a website, you can just find a lot of articles on that. So I'm not really going to explain in the detail, but I will just go through these tips. If you have any questions related to these topics here I'm mentioning, just let me know. Just post questions. We're going to have at least 5 minutes in the end to take some questions. Hopefully I'm not going too fast. David, you good? Simon, you think I'm good? All right, looks like I'm good, because no answer is a good answer, right? So first thing is, make sure every website, if you're building a web system, public website, or even, yeah, make sure it's HTTPS. That's the first requirement these days. All browsers, if your website is not HTTPS, some of web browsers actually not is going to show you. Google already announced that Chrome is not going to display your website if it's not HTTPS. And HTTPS, what it does is really, when a client, a person visits your website, let's say they type in the browser your website URL, if it's HTTPS, what happens is that the data being sent from the server to the client is now secure, encrypted. So that kind of is one of the very, very basic feature you can implement to make your website secure. If you have an API, for example, don't keep it HTTP, make it HTTPS. It's not really hard. It literally takes, I would say, less than 2 hours to enable and make your website or your API HTTPS. There's a lot of articles out there, and it's free too. You don't need to even pay. There's certificates that are free. So that's what one thing you can do that. Now, second thing start with that is, I always I talk to developers. We start a new project, and I go and for code reviews and audits, I'll ask developers, like, hey, is your connection string secure? We're like, no, we will come back later. Right now it's just in config file. Or, oh, right now we have a connection string variable in our code, and that shows everything, what the server name is, user ID, password, database name, everything is there. I understand you can go and fix that later, but that's not what secure first design principle is. Secure first design principle is that from the day one, you have to make those secure. You have to make sure your all your connection strings and your login credentials, they're not in plain text anywhere in your config files, in your app settings, in your code. That's rule number one. um, and because I know how developers think, and that we will do it later, and later may not come never, right? This happens all the time. Number three, you got to enforce complex password and with rules, right? This is very important. If you look at the history, if you look at all the data coming from hacking, like bank passwords, have bank accounts hacked in, the reason they're saying is that most people have these simple passwords. You know what is the most common password is? Anybody? If anybody can answer what is the most common password used in the world, they will win. Let's say what? I would say we'll give away 100 stacks to them. 100 stack is a worth probably 115, 120, $30. So if you can tell me what is the simplest password in the world, which most people use, uh, you will win this 100 stacks. I will answer this later if I don't see that. Yes, like keep those coming. You will be surprised. One of my articles actually I made on it's an article on C Sharp Corner I wrote. I made a list of I think top 20 passwords, and you'll be surprised. Even like some U.S. senators, their passwords like very common, which is default password. Also, let me ask you this: how many times you guys, let's say your email is created by your admin, how many times do you go and change that password? Unless it's not enforced, right? Think about that. That's where most hacks comes is. So when you are building a new web page and login functionality in it, make sure from the day one you enforce these complex password rules. If you have a server, make sure you have policy that every 30 days or 90 days password has to be changed, right? If you have, and let's say number four, let's go to number four. If you have a form where you're asking the data, email, somebody wants to contact you and all that, make sure you disable bots, because that's another way. Bots are checking your emails. They will send you this some kind of message on your website, and that will have a link in there, and somebody is going to click on that link to just see, and boom. So these are some things as software developers, these are our responsibility. When we are building this, software, this is our job to keep this in mind. And make sure you have number five is industry standard authentication authorization. So don't just use what you've been doing for so long. Make sure you also update yourself. See any change I've done in .NET framework for authentication authorization. And there's changes all the time. If you look at every year, new version comes out, there are some changes. Look at number six, don't expose code, right? So I have also seen that JavaScript files from time to time. Code is there, everything is there. If you look at the JavaScript file, you can literally see everything. So try not to put everything on the client side. Number seven, implement acceptance error handling has to be thorough. That should be from day one, right? And then don't rely on server security. As a software developer, you cannot say that, oh, my IT or servers are secure, we are good. Sometimes, I hear from people. I hear is that, oh, this is just internet-based application, so we don't really worry about security because only people in the company are going to access it. Yes, agree. But it doesn't mean that you cannot implement security on the front end, right? Imagine in your house, when you think of security, think of this your house, right? In your house, you have a safe which is locked, and then you have money inside that. Your money, you have gold, you have watches, everything in your safe. And you say, oh, my safe is locked, so let me leave my door open. You think that's a good idea? So front end is your door. Front end is the house, door of your house. You cannot leave the front end open so thieves can come in, walk in, and go to the safe and steal the, in this case, is data. So you have to think this is our responsibility as software developers and front-end developers is to make sure that these points are discussed in our design and architecture meetings. I hope you guys learning something. Let me know your comments. Oh, by the way, I'm still waiting for, let me see, password. Nope, I don't see the password, which is most common used by by most people. Yeah, but I'll tell you right now, it's called password 123. Password 123 is the most common password in the world. So that's the answer. So so we just talked about the front end security. So if you are a software developer, front end developer, you cannot just say that, oh, I just need to build the UI. I'm not worried about security. This is not my job. There's an IT guy, there's a security team. They're gonna come back and look at that, because security IT guys don't think on software terms. They think is if their server is secure, the network is secure. They think everything is secure. But do you really know that 62% of hacking is done through front ends, not from the back end, not from the servers, from the front end? That means the door of your house. You cannot leave your door open. That's important part. Yeah, thank you, Joe, for comments. Yes. Uh, password 123. There you go. It's not even at the rate, actually. It's a password 123 without at the rate. That's one of the most common. All right. So that was so you just saw the front end security. So if you are responsible for building the front end, you have to keep those things in mind. I can add 10 more things to that, but that's the minimum thing. If you take care of those minimum things, automatically your software is more secure than it was before. And these are not hard to do. That's the good part. All these things we just saw earlier, they're not hard to do. Code is already there, functionality is already there. All you have to do is make sure you have in your checkbox in the, yes, we did this, yes, check, 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 check. Once you do that, your software is already way secure than it was before. All right. So now we talked about front end. Let's go to data security. So data security also, again, it's not just DBAs, it's also in job of developers, right? A lot of us, we work on database as well, right? If you are a backend developer or you are a full stack developer, we end up doing all the work. We end up creating database tables, we create store procs, we also work with the data direct, right? DBAs are great, they will initially will help, but in most cases, in some large corporations, DBAs do control the database. But if you are a DBA or a developer working with the databases, there are some things you also need to keep in mind. Number one, encrypt sensitive data. From day one, I have seen again and again and again, the most systems are hacked because databases store the emails, the password, the logins, the credit card, they're all plain text. If you're using any of the latest databases, SQL Server, Oracle, doesn't matter, whichever, as long as you have one of the latest versions, they have these features where it can automatically encrypt those columns and it decrypt automatically. There's not much overhead. Okay, it's not going to affect performance much. You won't even notice it. Those features are already there. Okay, so yeah, and it's all there. It's all there. All we have to do is make sure it's implemented or it's like enabled, right? They even suggest that, I just saw other day SQL Server team announced SQL Ledger. SQL Ledger is pretty much a blockchain in SQL Server. It's not a chain, but at least it's the same. It's basically it's an immutable database. Let's just say that immutable means once it's written, nobody can go and change it. So if somebody hacker goes and try to change the data, they can do that. So the point I'm making here is that the functionality is there, the feature is there. You just have to go and look at it and make sure it's enabled. Make sure it's implemented. If you are using SQL queries or, make sure it's there, it's done, implemented there. Number two, SQL injections. Look at that. 62% of cyber attacks. I did research on that. The 62% of cyber attacks are done through SQL injections. So, that's kind of thing you have to make sure. And number three, embedded. I still see some people writing queries in their HTML, JavaScript files and putting all there. That's the bad way to do it. You do not want to expose your database column names or anything in the front end side or client side. Server side, okay, sure, maybe. I still don't recommend SQL at all. Personally, if you ask me, I'm not a big fan of putting SQL in code. It should not be there at all. And we just talked about number four, the SQL immutable ledger. Number five, yes, this is very important. This is very important. Do not, when you are creating new database objects like tables, history procs, by default, it should be read only. Okay, it should be read only access, and it should be minimum access to the users. When you are creating those roles and users, only admin should have more control over the things, right? But let's just say you have an application that's going to read and write and update and all that, then you just create a separate application user, and you have to see what functionality. Sometimes one user may just need access to three tables, so you have to figure that out. But you have to make sure you look at the right roles, right permissions, and by default they should be the minimum access required. That should be the default. It shouldn't be default like make admin. Sometimes what developers do is, or non DBAs, they end up doing is like, what, I'm not going to come to this, let's give him admin access to everything. So that's a bad way to do that. That's definitely, you do not want to do that. So yeah, let those comments coming. That's exactly, yeah. Joe said DOS, those attacks are nasty. Yeah, you're right. And then that's where history tells us we should learn from history. There is a question how to overcome from malware attacks. I have written actually a perfect article on that on C Sharp Corner. Maybe Simon can find it and share that. It says how to keep your data, secure. I did a lot of research and I wrote a detailed article on that. But I'll take this question in the end. So let's move to our next screen. So we just talk about the front end. We just talk about the data. Now, if you are working on a backend code or APIs, there's definitely you need to also think about security. You cannot just say, my database guys are taking up database, my front end guys taking my front end, so I'm good. You need to think about security as well, right? So here are 9 tips here. Secure APIs, you have to figure out the latest technology. If you're using token-based authentication, whichever it is, make sure it's secure. Obviously, it has to be HTTPS, rule number 1. I talked in my previous slide, right? You have to definitely separate read-only and write APIs if you can. I know developers love, creating just one single API, call, and that's where you can do all that. That's great, but you have to look at, is it going to impact, is there security problems with this? If that's the case, you have to fix those holes, right? Definitely do not store sensitive data in plain text. Do not also input parameters and user validations are important. That's very important. Sometimes input parameters and user validations are important. And what I'm seeing on our C Sharp Corner on forums, we don't have, I'm telling everybody what to do, but even on C Sharp Corner, we don't have some of these user validation input parameters. Sometimes people can just type ABCD and that will be the title of the forum. Sometimes they can start. So the point I'm making is that even though these are little things, but they should be part of our day one design, right? Let's look at number 5, implement logging and capture exceptions. That's very common, right? Passwords, if you are storing password and passing through, hashing is the best way to do it, because good thing is hashing, nobody can read it and nobody can find it, what your password is, right? Only user can change it. And these days passwords, you see, these days also the double multi-authentication, right? You can implement all those as well. Number 7, never expose sensitive data and URLs, right? This is not always do. I've seen sometimes you will see, okay, in my URL, I can see the ID in there. Sometimes you can see the, bunch of data. That's just do not pass that if it's any sensitive data. I'm not a big fan of URL, too much data being passed in URL anyway. It also makes your URL too long. Implement latest industry standards. There's so many tools out there, third parties for being used for these authentication. If your company is implementing that, look at those, right? Most large corporations they use one of those services. So if you're using that, that's great. If you're not, even you don't want to use, that's fine. Make sure you look at Microsoft or whatever technology you're using for latest security guidelines, right? There's always guidelines released by Microsoft, Google, whichever technology you're using, right? So make sure you read those. These are important. And this is not just for security team. This is not for somebody called IT security. Okay, that's different. I'm talking about software developers. So software developers also need to become at least these security experts, at least considering these points. If there are request timestamps also helps, because then you can easily audit and track things like that. So that will also help. Now you want more details on that. There's a detailed articles on each of these topics on C Sharp Corner. Again, as I said, if I start talking each of this is pretty much one session on each of these topics. I just want to make sure I cover these, so you, when you take a screenshot of this or you download, then you can go and read these details how to implement, depending on what kind of API you're building. Right, you're building API using ASP.NET Core, then yes, different. So you have to look at how you are going to use these, tips in your software when you're building. And now this is the last one, server security. Server security is more for this is for the IT people, right? This is not for software developers, but that's where IT people will work with, say, architects and lead developers to set these. That's how you manage servers, right? Make sure we got hacked actually early last year, just because our hosting company did not have the latest patches. Okay, C Sharp Corner got hacked, and we were hosting with the Rec Space, and we got hacked with this WannaCry ransomware, which asked for bitcoins, because this came in 2017. That means they have not updated some of our servers for that long. Server means operating system. I'm not talking about the software. I'm talking about operating system. So security updates and patches, that's where IT teams, they do already. I'm not saying you are going to do that. This is not as a software developer's job. This is mostly IT teams. But when you are in the meetings, when you're designing the software secure first approach design principle, you're going to put these points and make sure IT team is also on the same page. Firewall and port security, that's by default. Every company does that. Separate environment for dev, QA, prod, that's pretty standard. There's nothing new here. Separate hard drives. This is very important, number 4. Right? Separate hard drives for web versus storage versus permissions on those hard drives. So sometimes you have this website where this website may also have people upload files. If they're uploading files, this should be going totally on different drive, where just in case something goes wrong, it does not affect your website, does not affect your database. And again, I'm running out of time here, but we can still quick run through these. Disable any scripting. Scripting and write permissions should not be on any hard drive by default. Only limited number of access, yes, by default should be the limited number of access. Separate databases in web servers, definitely. Monitor apps logs. So this is more like IT people implement. Again, do regular third-party audits and make sure update yourself with latest changes in that operating system or security patches. Microsoft release security patches every week. I can tell you that's the fastest thing they release. So that's something to look for. And these are some of the references. If you like to have this, again, this slide, I will make sure Simon has access to that. He can share the slide with you. But if you keep those some 20 some points, 25, 27 points in mind when you are designing a new software, I bet your software is going to be much more secure than without these.